This is Eyewitness News, the news leader, with Bill Ritter and Liz Cho, Scott Clark with sports, and Lee Goldberg with the exclusive AccuWeather forecast. Now, Eyewitness News at 11.
They're calling it Miracle on the Hudson.
You just heard the pilot, brace yourself for impact.
And that's when I knew that, we were going down.
A U.S. Airways plane loses power and then makes an emergency landing on the Hudson River.
When it hit the Hudson River, it just looked like a volcano exploded.
Everyone on board, 155 people, make it out alive thanks to some brilliant piloting. And tonight, he's being hailed as a hero.
Hey, God bless, man. I'm just happy that everyone on that plane lived.
And good evening, everyone. What a night at 11 o'clock. I'm Bill Ritter.
And I'm Liz Cho. And we begin with U.S. Airways Flight 1549. And tonight, the stories of what really happened, the frantic rescues, the first responders braving the elements and trying to save lives while the plane bobbed in the Hudson. The passengers out on the wing and desperate to be on one of the many ferries that raced to the scene. Some of those passengers bravely going back to help others. And the plane tonight still in the Hudson River, but now tethered in Battery Park City. Did a flock of birds bring it down? And how did the hero pilot manage to avoid buildings and glide his powerless jet in for an emergency landing? We have several reports tonight. We begin our coverage with Eyewitness News reporter Jeff Begades in Battery Park City, where NTSB investigators are examining the plane. Jeff.
Yeah, Liz, NTSB investigators have arrived on the scene, part of a 20-member team that will literally begin the process of piecing together what went wrong. Firefighters peered down on U.S. Airways Flight 1549. The plane was still in the frigid Hudson River more than 6 hours after it first hit the water. This is video capturing the plane floating in the water shortly after impact. A ferry was first to the rescue. At that point, all 155 people are still on board, waiting for help with the plane filling with water.
You just never prepare for something like this, and just happy to be standing here, I guess, with all these people looking to ask questions.
According to FAA officials, the plane took off from LaGuardia Airport at about 3:03 p.m. Destination, Charlotte. Problems began in the air. The union that represents air traffic controllers says less than a minute into the flight, the pilot reported a double bird strike and said he needed to turn back. Soon after that, the plane splashed into the water off Manhattan's west side.
When it hit the Hudson River, it just looked like a volcano exploded.
Within minutes, several ferry boats arrived, as well as rescue crews. Eventually, passengers made their way onto the wing and then to boats. Moments later, land. Some of the passengers were soaking wet in the bitter cold, but also thankful to be alive.
It would appear that the pilot did a masterful job of landing the plane in the river and then making sure that everybody got out.
What you're looking at is one of the plane's wings still intact, thanks in part the pilot's flying skills. The pilot has been identified as 58-year-old Chelsea Sullenberger. He will no doubt face NTSB questioning. We're live in Battery Park City. Jeff Begades, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Jeff, thank you. And late tonight, we learned the pilot of Flight 1549 was originally given clearance for an emergency landing at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. According to a spokesperson for the air traffic controllers, the pilot reported bird strikes about 30 to 45 seconds after takeoff. The controller asked him to return to LaGuardia, but the pilot noticed an airstrip below him, which was Teterboro. He was granted permission to land there, but that was the last radio contact before he ditched in the Hudson. According to controllers, there were no maydays or emergency distress calls during the entire episode, and it is still unclear why the pilot did not try to land at Teterboro.
So many remarkable stories you're going to hear tonight, stories of people quickly thinking of others. We're going to begin with one of the passengers on board. It was a baby and its mother protecting and holding on to her infant. You can just imagine. Eyewitness News reporter Anthony Johnson in North Bergen with the story of the man who pulled mother and child out of that plane. Anthony?
Well, Bill, he was actually the last person to leave the plane. He was the last survivor. He says he was at the right place at the right time. He saw that mother. She was standing there holding her baby in her arms.
It was controlled chaos.
Dave Sanderson says when the plane came down in the water, panic set in.
People started running over the seats. People started running up the aisle. No one was grabbing their seats like you're supposed to because you're in the water.
Some passengers grabbed their luggage while Dave was helping people get out, including a woman who apparently did not know what to do while standing in the sinking plane with her baby.
She was behind me. Another guy, he gets all the credit too, picked her up and we put her on the wing. And the people on the lifeboat kept saying, "Passengers, throw us a baby, throw us a baby." And she wouldn't do it.
They're doing great. And the baby, you would never know, had gone through any kind of ordeal.
Dave says that old adage, women and children first, was not the reality on the plane.
I didn't see any pushing. What I did see people was climbing over the seats instead of going down the aisle, which made it challenging.
Dave Sanderson says the only person who remained calm was the pilot, who never seemed to lose control.
He's the one who made the right call. He made it, and he handled it with grace when he said "embrace for impact." It wasn't yelling or anything. "Embrace for impact." And for me, that was a command. It wasn't excitement. It was like a command. Okay, you do it.
Sanderson was supposed to be on another flight, but wanted to get back home to his wife and 4 kids in Charlotte, and doesn't regret being on the plane that went down in the Hudson.
You know, everybody would do what they need to do in that kind of circumstance. And God, I was supposed to take the later flight, and God put me on that plane for a reason.
Sanderson tonight is an amazing man. Now, he says the only time that he really got scared is when he got out of the plane, he got into the boat. He could not feel his feet. Obviously, he was feeling the effects of frostbite. He's been taken here to the hospital. He is recovering. His body is warming up, and now he's looking forward to returning home to Charlotte tomorrow. That is the latest live from North Bergen, New Jersey. Anthony Johnson, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
Just remarkable. Anthony, thank you. And we are hearing from another passenger tonight and another dramatic story. Alberto Pinero, a medical student from Florida, was here interviewing for his residency at NYU. He was on his way to Charlotte for interviews there. Jim Dolan is here now with much more on Mr. Pinero's story. Jim.
Well, Liz, Alberto Pinero was tired. He just wanted to take a little nap. He's trying to doze off just after takeoff when he was suddenly jolted back to reality. A deafening explosion, a head-whipping U-turn, and the heart-stopping words from the pilot. Brace for impact.
I thought, I guess I guess this is it. I guess I'm going to die.
Albert Pinero heard an explosion and felt the plane make a sharp U-turn. They were 3,000 feet in the air, going 170 miles an hour. And they were sure they were all about to die.
And we just started getting lower and lower. And next thing you know, he gets on the intercom and goes, "Embrace for impact." And that's when I knew that, we were going down, and you could just see the water getting closer and closer. Before the crash, it got pretty silent, actually. There was maybe a couple of people that yelled and kind of bursted out in tears. But I think everybody in there was pretty much preparing for the worst. The next thing you know, the plane makes impact. After the first hit, I was expecting something to come hit me or some sort of explosion, something to just kill me. And when that didn't happen, it was a big relief.
Pinero saw the emergency exits open and walked out onto the wing of the plane he had just crashed in. Moments later, he was in a raft.
And once I got on the raft, I said, okay, unless something else goes wrong.
Nothing else went wrong. Pinero said later that it's hard to imagine a plane crash could bring so much joy to so many people. But knowing he survived, he said, made him more eager than ever to see what else, what opportunities, what adventures life has to offer him, now that he has a nice, long life ahead. Bill?
And I'm sure he'll take advantage of it now. Jim, thank you. So what would you do? What would you do if you were in that plane? None of us really knows for sure until it happens. Do you swim? Do you climb on the wing and wait to be rescued? And if you do swim, do you keep your clothes on or swim without in 42-degree water? Eyewitness News reporter Kimberly Richardson with a man who faced that decision. She's on the Upper West Side with that part of our coverage. Kim?
Well, Bill, we've all done it shortly after takeoff, dozed off in our seats. Well, that's exactly what happened to Bill Zawalski this afternoon. Then a sudden jolt woke him up. He assumed it was turbulence. Couldn't have been further from the truth.
For a second, I just thought that I was going to die right there in a plane, I was just going to drown to death.
Bill Zuhaski was near the back of U.S. Air Flight 1549 in seat 23A when a tremendous jolt woke him up and an eerie announcement rattled his reality. The plane was going down.
The people sitting next to me, we were, interlocked with our arms. And then you just heard the pilot, brace yourself for impact.
No one had any idea if the aircraft was going to hit the water or land. Seconds later, the impact.
I guess my head slammed into it. I lost my glasses, and then the water came up immediately.
The 23-year-old from Long Island remembers the other passengers running towards him. The extra weight now pushing the tail of the plane deeper into the Hudson, the frigid water eventually reaching his neck.
The water was coming up so fast in the back, I ripped all my clothes off thinking, I'd be lighter, I might have to swim. And I was, I think, one of the last to get off of the plane. I crawled over the top of the seats.
And out the emergency exits. It was then that everybody realized it was going to be okay and pulled together to help each other. Passengers grateful to be alive.
Everybody owes their lives to the pilot. He did an amazing job.
Now here's another thing. Bill was not supposed to be on U.S. Air Flight 1549. He was scheduled to take off at 11:30 on a different airline, but due to the weather, his flight was canceled. Other than a few bumps and bruises, he's doing fine, resting at home in Long Island tonight. For now, we're live on the Upper West Side. Kimberly Richardson, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
Kimberly, thank you. The response by rescuers, simply astounding, both for its speed and its efficiency. Now, we expect that from police and fire first responders, but also participating, as they did on 9/11, the folks who operate the ferries that do business on the Hudson. Eyewitness News reporter Sarah Wallace with the story of the rescuers. She's on the west side as well. Sarah?
Well, Bill, the pilot may have landed on a wing and a prayer, but he also just happened to pick the ideal location for rescuers out there in the Hudson, midway between ferry terminals here on the New York side and the New Jersey side.
They were wet, they were scared, crying, a few people injured.
But Vince Lombardi and other New York waterway captains just did what they practice in drills every month, calmly moving their ferries into place. But they've never done it with 14 boats, a delicate maneuver with so many other rescue boats at the scene and waiting survivors beginning to unravel.
Everybody was panicked, nervous, crying, screaming.
Were some in the water?
Actually, the wind was going down, so people was like halfway in the water. They were like, we're gonna die, they were cold, we gotta get out of here. And
crew members on one boat rescued 56 people, including 2 babies. As deckhands on the ferries pulled passengers to safety, an arriving NYPD aviation unit dropped scuba divers into the river from a hovering helicopter.
At that point, we looked out, we saw 2 people in immediate distress at that time. One woman was just holding on to the side of the ferry boat, trying to get up onto the ferry and was unable to make it. At that point, I dumped all my equipment off and went in just surface gear, which would be a mask and a snorkel. She was very frantic at the time. I just told her to relax. I asked her what her name was. She said, please don't let me go.
After swimming the survivor over to another ferry, Detective Michael Delaney and his partner swam into the plane to make sure no one was trapped.
We went into the plane. We did a quick search. We saw that there was nobody else in the plane. And at that point, the headrests in the back of the aircraft were already going underwater.
The headrests already going underwater. Delaney says at that point he decided that he and his partner needed to get out, so they did, but not before checking the aircraft again to make sure that no one else was trapped. As the governor told us today, it was a spectacular day for New York. It could have been a dismal day. It wasn't, especially for first responders. Live from the West Side, Sarah Wallace, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
It certainly was, and it certainly was for the pilot of the plane. So who exactly is he? His name is Chesley B. Sullenberger III, or Sully for short. His bio says he has 40-plus years in the aviation industry. He's been a pilot with U.S. Airways since 1980, and before that, he was an F-4 pilot for the U.S. Air Force. Tonight, he will be interviewed by the NTSB investigators about what happened in the moments leading up to today's crash landing, or emergency landing, we should say. But there is no doubt so many are crediting him with saving those on board. So exactly how difficult is it to do what Captain Sullenberger did tonight? We are joined now by Nigel Mull, an aviation expert. Mr. Mull, thank you for coming in this evening. So how difficult is it to pull off a ditching maneuver like this?
It's tough. It's a supreme test of airmanship, and I think it's fair to say that Captain Sullenberger did it absolutely right.
He glided his way in. Now, he's trained like this, we're told, in the Air Force Academy, but there are all sorts of bad ways to glide into the water, right? We've seen it in the past.
We have indeed. Back in '96, the Ethiopian 767, which was hijacked, and that's a ditching that didn't go right. It did not land level, the wing dug in, and it cartwheeled. That's how close the difference is between doing it right and doing it wrong.
This is the file video of that hijacked plane, and you're talking about a margin of error of a very small percent there when you're bringing that in. This is a big aircraft with no power.
No power.
And this guy's gliding it in.
We've heard so much about a ditching switch. Was that what was on board, and did that help keep the plane afloat?
Apparently so. The Airbus has a ditch switch, which is in the overhead panel, and by pushing just that one switch, it closes pressurization outflow valves, and in fact any valve below the float line to stop any water coming in.
Well, he did a remarkable job, as you were saying earlier, across the internet, around the world. Pilots are talking about this. Yeah. Nigel Mall, we appreciate you coming in tonight.
Thanks very much.
So much. Please, here now with a check of the weather. And Lee, you were telling us that we were really fortunate the timing of this emergency landing today.
Hey, you think about it, the snow ends around lunchtime, and we're expecting an Arctic front to come through in the afternoon. That typically is going to kick up the winds.
But
this happens just prior to the Arctic front coming through. If you notice, our newscopter had to be grounded from coverage because of some snow showers that came through and the winds that picked up.
I'll knock on wood.
And then that's right. And then all the pictures you see,
the water was fairly calm,
like a piece of glass.
Yes. We were really lucky.
They were lucky.
Just remarkable. Now the wind is kicked up. Obviously, this is serious chill that we're talking about as we go through the next day, and then early next week we make a run at freezing again. It has been a while.
But again, we had a little window of opportunity. If the plane had to make an emergency landing in that water,
that was the time to do it.
Okay.